the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes, aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to talk about Divorce Month. So Divorce Month is going on right now. Filings are up, people's tolerance is down, and this may feel especially true if you're on the cusp of co-parenting with an ex who abuses alcohol. In these instances, preparation is really key, and there's no better tool on the market to safeguard your kids than SoberLink. SoberLink is the most trusted alcohol monitoring tool for tracking a co-parent's alcohol misuse. Think of it as a high-tech breathalyzer that notifies you instantly if your co-parent is drinking. Are you worried they'll cheat? Not possible. See, when your co-parent tests, facial recognition confirms their identity and tamper sensors flag any attempts to beat the system. Every single family law attorney I know trusts SoberLink to improve child safety in custody cases involving alcohol. Set up your family today for success and include SoberLink's court-admissible system in your parenting agreement. If you want to learn more and if you want to get $50 off your device, just go to soberlink.com/DGS for Divorced Girl Smiling, soberlink.com/DGS. That's how you get the $50 off. I also want to tell you about a wonderful therapist in Chicago. Her name is Julie Walton. She's an LCPC. She's a therapist, and she's also a mediator. Julie is wonderful. Julie actually highly experienced, so well respected, so professional, and she spent a lot of time working with people who were victims of trauma, who had depression, who were victims of domestic abuse. Julie is amazing. If you want to learn more, you can find Julie at northshorereach.com, and you can also find Julie and SoberLink in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. If you are going through a divorce and you have children, you're going to hear the term child support, and you're either going to be receiving it or giving it. And what I want to do during this episode is talk to you about child support, what the definition is, what it means, and give you kind of a guide and answer all the questions that you might have in regards to child support. My guest is Colleen Breems. Colleen is a divorce attorney and a partner with Beermann in Chicago. And she's been a divorce attorney for about 10 years. I've known Colleen for about a year now. And welcome.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me.
Always nice to talk to you, Colleen.
You too.
Thank you for taking the time. So, do you agree with me that when you get a new client, the word child support, it's kind of like, okay, what is that? Like, this is all foreign to people who have never been through a divorce, right?
Yeah, I think that some people think that they know what child support is, but some don't. And it's really important to define it. When we're talking about child support, what we're talking about is the payments of money from one co-parent to another. And it's meant to cover the child's essentials. And we're talking about basic necessities, food, clothing, and shelter generally. It's meant to contribute to that. Over and above that, we could also be looking at contribution to child-related expenses, and that could look like educational expenses, extracurricular expenses, even contribution to religious expenses, if any. But with child support, what we're looking at is contribution to basic necessities for a child.
Okay, now, Colleen, so child support, the lump sum payment that the person has to pay every month, that's just for the basics. Then what you're saying is They're going to also have to possibly help pay for like school activities and all these other things that aren't like basic necessities, technically. Do people get upset when they hear this? They're like, wait a minute, I have to pay this specific amount every month, but now I also have to pay for half of soccer camp and stuff like that.
It really depends on the person. I don't know if anyone is always thrilled about needing to spend money, but here I like to remind clients that it's for your child. It's to ensure that your child has what he or she needs. And children cost money. That's just a fact of life. So sometimes we need to have that conversation.
Okay, we're going to get into that later because that's a very important point about how people resent paying child support, why they do, and what you can do about it if your ex is giving you a hard time. But we'll save that. I want to start with, how do you start receiving child support? When you first get separated, how does the process begin?
So, generally speaking, the process can begin one of two ways. The ideal one is you're able to come to an agreement with your co parents about a child support figure, and you can enter that into an agreed order with the courts, and that would start child support. The other way, if you can't reach an agreement, is to file a motion for temporary and permanent child support with the courts and asking the court to make an order. Temporary child support is child support that can be payable while a divorce is pending. So you don't need to wait until your divorce is finalized to start getting that support. And permanent child support isn't meant to be permanent, meaning payable forever, but it means payable when the divorce is finalized up until your child is emancipated. And what that means is when your child is both 18 and graduated from high school.
Now, can you give me a percentage of how many people receive temporary child support after getting a court order versus coming to an agreement either via mediation or attorneys? What's the percentage? Or you can't say?
Right. It's really hard to say because every case is different. And that's because every couple and every family is different. So there's no standard or really hard and fast rule for how it shakes out. Really, it depends on the reasonability of the parties and how much information we know or can agree upon. Sometimes the parties can't agree on the number of overnights they're going to be having with their child, or can't even agree as to how their income should be calculated. And if they're fighting about those pieces, it's really helpful for us to have some core intervention to guide us through if we can't get it through mediation or the collaborative process. It really does depend.
Well, I would think at the beginning of a divorce, emotions are much more heated. People are angry, resentful, scared, and confused and really defensive. So I would think that there are probably some couples who have to get the child support from a judge, like they have to do litigation route, and then they end up being able to go to mediation later when everybody just kind of relaxes and the temperature comes down. Don't you think? I mean, that's kind of what I would think would happen.
Sometimes it does happen that way.
Mm.
And I think that you're exactly correct. I think it's very common for people who are at the outset of a divorce case to be dealing with a ton of emotionality. They're probably grieving the loss of the relationship and the life that they expected. They're probably worried about what's going to happen to their children and how much time they're going to have with their children. They're probably worried about the split of the financials and if there's going to be enough to go around. They're probably also dealing with some really tough, feelings and tough interpersonal relationship with their co-parents as they navigate, this divorce. It's very common for there to be hurt feelings and for that to really kind of color interactions. So I would say it's common to see emotion rule the day at the outset, which can make reaching agreements harder. And it does happen where sometimes the case can start out really hot in court, lots of litigation, and then when the temperature comes down and the emotionality comes down, we can talk about mediating some issues. That does happen. Also, best case scenario, some couples come to us where they're able to kind of separate their hurt feelings and the emotionality uh, from the process and be open to mediating or doing a collaborative divorce right away, which I do think can also not only be a cost savings, but also a bit of a stress reducer for the clients.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. I'm talking today with Colleen Breems, divorce attorney and partner with Beermann, a great law firm in Chicago. And Colleen and I are talking about child support and trying to discuss all the questions you might have if you are headed into a divorce or in the middle of one. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how child support is calculated. And then also, we're going to talk about why there's resentment when it comes to child support and why some people don't want to pay. And guess what? Sometimes it has nothing to do with the actual money. We'll be right back. When you're going through a divorce, it's hard to plan ahead. In fact, I can remember just aiming to get through the week or even the day. And the day your divorce is finalized, among other emotions, it's a huge relief. At least it was for me. I felt like a very large weight was lifted off me, and now I could just breathe and start a new chapter. However, I didn't realize that there's a to-do list that comes with a divorce being finalized. It's a checklist of things that has to be done, and one of those things is getting a new will and trust. I cannot stress enough how important it is, and the process should be started no more than a few weeks after your divorce is final. If you live in Illinois, you should contact Emily Roswadowski. She is a wills and estate planning attorney. She's been in business for like 17 years. Emily is wonderful. She can help you obtain your post-divorce will and trust. Emily does not charge by the hour. It's a fixed cost. So unlike your divorce attorney, you can talk to Emily for as long as you want, and it's not going to cost you any more money. If you want to learn more, you can find Emily at emilyroslaw.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful team of divorce mediators. Their names are Ellen Feldman and Brian James, and their company is CEL and Associates. They have been mediating together since 2007. Ellen is an attorney, not a divorce attorney. She's a former litigating attorney. Brian has been a mediator for decades, and he's a parenting coordinator. And together, the two of them see couples who are getting divorced. It's really nice because you get both of them in your mediation sessions. I've known Ellen and Brian for over 15 years. I think the world of them, and I really trust them. If you want to learn more about them, you can find them at celandassociates.com. And you can find both Emily and CEL and Associates in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. We are talking today about child support. This is your guide to child support. We're trying to answer all the questions that you might have. My guest is divorce attorney Colleen Breems. Colleen has been practicing for 10 years. She's a partner at Beermann. And if you want to reach Colleen, she can be found at Beermannlaw.com, and Beermann is Beermann, Beermannlaw.com. Okay, so Colleen, tell me how child support is calculated.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a guideline child support formula in the Illinois statutes, and how it's calculated is based on each co-parent's incomes as well as the number of overnights that that parent has with the child. And those figures are plugged into the formula, and it lets us know what child support would be payable to whom.
Okay, now let's say a couple is in mediation. Can they come up with their own child support amount, or is this something that is like, this is it, and it's hard to, like other things in mediation, you can be creative and come up with your own thing? Is child support different?
That's the beauty of child support, and that's the beauty of mediation. Um, what we have in the statute is called guideline for a reason, and it's really kind of the
Okay.
baseline if the parties cannot agree to something else.
I
When
don't think
parties
I ever
are
knew that.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I don't think I ever knew that. I can't believe I didn't realize it was like a guideline. I thought it was like a law and that was the amount, but what you're saying is it's only the amount if the couple cannot agree.
Correct. And that's true in divorce in general. Parties can come up with their own agreements, which would be outside of what a court would normally order in mediation in the collaborative room or through an uncontested divorce process where they try to tease out the issues without court intervention. With child support, it's much the same. They can agree to their own figure. And as long as it's something that is comfortable for both of them and the court doesn't find it unconscionable, the court can bless that figure and enter it. The court may want to know about the circumstances for how a certain amount was reached and why, because that will help preserve the record and will also help the court in the event that child support needs to be changed. But parties can agree to their own figure should they wish.
So this is what I tell people who are wondering if they should go to mediation and they're a little nervous because they're like, "Well, I don't want to, what if I get a bad deal?" And I say what you just said, Colleen, that a judge, and Colleen used the term the court, it's the same thing. The judge is the one who looks at all the agreements you made and says, the judge has the power to say, "No, this isn't fair." So if you're thinking of going to mediation, a huge um, benefit that you might be afraid that you're not going to get a good deal. Two things. First, your divorce attorney is going to look over the agreement and say, "You agreed to this? Nah, I disagree. I don't think we should agree to this." And then, even if your divorce attorney agrees to it, a judge then has to think it's fair too. So, really, you're getting a lot of protection. Do you agree, Colleen?
Absolutely.
Mhm. Okay, let's move on to modifying child support. How does that work? So, child support, I always hear it's modifiable all the time. What does that mean? And in what cases might somebody want to modify child support?
Sure. So when we're talking about child support being modifiable, what we're talking about is the figure that's entered, say, on a temporary basis while your divorce case is pending, may not be the figure that's appropriate down the line. And that's because the number of overnights that each parent has, the employment or incomes each parent may have, can fluctuate and change. And when there are substantial changes of circumstance in those areas, child support can be recalculated. How to modify child support is pretty similar to how to commence child support. You can either reach an agreement with your co parents about what child support should be based on those changes of circumstance, or the person who's seeking a modification can file a motion with the court, asking the court to assist them in ordering a recalculated child support figure if appropriate.
All right, next question. This is kind of a biggie. What happens if someone doesn't pay 1 month? Now, I know that you can garnish wages, and I believe that means you can have it taken out of your spouse's ex's paycheck so it comes to you automatically. But not everybody does it that way. Um, so what happens if like the person doesn't pay? How do you enforce child support and what do you do?
That's where the court can be extremely helpful. If child support is being paid directly as opposed to being garnished, and the person who's supposed to be paying doesn't pay or won't pay, the court's orders are there for a reason, and the court is there to help enforce it. If someone is not receiving child support when they're ordered to receive it, they can file a motion with the court to let the court know that this person isn't paying. And the court can compel that person to pay, can further punish that person through lots of different remedies, and can even order the non-payer to pay the other parent's attorney's fees for the trouble. So those are avenues to explore if that's happening.
Well, I absolutely think if somebody stops paying, they should either and listen, maybe somebody isn't paying because the person lost their job and now they can't afford it or they're scared. Well, instead of just not paying, they should call their ex or email through our family wizard or whatever, an email or a text and say, "Hey, I need to modify this. I just lost my job," instead of just not paying, right? Because if they modified to pay less, they would probably get it if they went to court first. So the person shouldn't wait until the other person who's supposed to be receiving child support goes to court. They should actually go and try to modify it. Is that true?
Absolutely. I think if there's been a situation like that where there's a reduction in income or a loss of a job and that person has a child support obligation, they absolutely shouldn't wait. They should file a motion to modify child support with the court right away because just sitting on it and not paying, even if someone has lost their job, is violating a court order, and courts don't appreciate that. And there are penalties that go along with it, like I alluded to earlier. And just because someone has lost their job doesn't mean that the court knows that. And it doesn't mean that the court knows to modify their child support obligation to change the order for what it is they need to pay and when. So I would always recommend that that person file a motion ASAP.
And if you're the person who is receiving the child support and your ex doesn't pay for some reason, you contact your attorney. That's just what you do, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, I think you said this, that can a person go to jail for not paying child support?
Courts can do that. I've seen courts do that. And generally speaking, what we see that come out of is if there's a contempt proceeding. If someone is not paying child support and the other parent files what's called a petition for to show cause, which basically is a petition telling the court that this person was ordered to pay child support and they're not. Courts can compel them to pay child support, and sometimes courts can also put someone in jail until they choose to pay. Courts call that holding the keys to your own cell. And it's another way to compel someone to make a payment. Now, is it super common to see that if just 1 month is missed? Not really, but depends on the judge, depends on the circumstances, and if someone is an egregious violator of the court's orders for child support, that is a step that the court can take.
Okay, let's get into why there's, from some people, a lot of resentment on paying child support. Now, I know many people who pay child support and are so gracious about it and so kind, and they know it's going to their children, and it's a beautiful thing to see. But there are other people who really feel resentful that they have to pay. And Colleen, I've seen this in people who have so much money, it doesn't even, like, matter. It's not that they can't afford it, and I've seen it in people who are struggling. It doesn't even matter the income bracket. A lot of people just feel resentful paying child support. Have you seen that?
It depends on the person, but sometimes there is some resentment in the idea that not only are you getting divorced, but insult to injury, you have to pay money to your spouse. And what I like to remind clients who owe a child support obligation is it's going for a good purpose. It's going to ensure that your child has food, clothing, and shelter when they're at the other parent's home. And while people who are divorcing often can't agree on very much, very often they can agree that they love their child and they want the best for their child and they want their child to be comfortable in both homes. So I think that's really important to remind someone who's not so crazy about the idea of paying child support.
Yes. Well, I just thought of a scenario when you were saying that about, like, let's say there's a guy and he thought the marriage was great, and then his wife had an affair. Now they're getting divorced, and he has to move into an apartment, not see his kids that much, and give child support every month. That would make me resentful. I'm not saying the guy was perfect. He might have been a terrible husband. We don't know the circumstances. But that is like one example of why somebody might feel angry, bitter, resentful about child support. It really doesn't have anything to do with the money or how much the person loves the kids. So I wanted to say that I wrote this article a long time ago called Why He Can't Stand Giving You That Child Support Check Every Month. I wrote this like several years ago and I just pulled it up. And it's so true. And tell me if you agree with me, Colleen. When someone has to hand over a child support check every month, a few things might be going on. Here are some potential reasons they might feel this way. It can bring back the emotions of the divorce because it's a monthly reminder. So that's why some people, I know a guy who actually paid 3 years of child support up front. Like the guy had so much money, it didn't even matter. But he didn't want to be reminded every month of the divorce. He was devastated. Okay, that's the first thing. Second, it can cause financial anxiety from somebody who might be not living paycheck to paycheck. Well, maybe, it can just feel, it could make you anxious. It can make a person feel like the divorce laws aren't fair. It can make the person wonder if the child support check is really going to the kids, or maybe he sees like the wife got a new car and is thinking, oh my gosh, she used the child support for that, which by the way, I don't think that happens very often. And then the person might feel like the ex isn't appreciative. So have you ever seen some of these feelings of resentment like this? And if so, what do you want to say to both the person getting the child support and the person giving it?
Yeah, that does come up sometimes. And again, what I would say is this is about your child. I know that it's got to feel difficult, not only to go through the emotionality of a divorce, and then also the idea of paying money to someone you maybe don't want to be paying money to because you don't have the best feelings for them. But the purpose of that payment is to make sure that your child is happy, healthy, and well cared for in both homes. And I think that generally speaking, both co-parents can agree upon that at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I have to bring up our family wizard. This is a great tool for people who are feeling resentful about child support because this app, it's ourfamilywizard.com. What you can do is put in your expenses, and then your ex can look at the app and see that you bought hockey skates for your son. That was $200. You purchased ballet lessons for your daughter. That was another $450. And it will make somebody feel so much better when they see, and I can speak from being somebody who received child support, that the amount that you are giving as child support, I bet you your person who is receiving it is spending way beyond what you're giving them. And you can see that if you're seeing the itemized expenses in the Our Family Wizard app. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that our Family Wizard is an excellent tool, and I love all of the functionality it has. One of the unique tools that you have on our Family Wizard that you don't see on every app is the ability to ask for expense reimbursement and to track expenses for a child. Because lots of times when someone is paying child support, they're concerned about where that money is going. And they're not entitled to, a full receipt of how the payee is spending that money to support a child. But the expense tracker can be helpful because they could see that their child is getting everything they need and that reimbursement is being requested. That's usually for the contribution to child-related expenses over and above child support.
Colleen, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your taking the time. I learned a lot. I thought I knew everything. And so thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
And to my listeners, I wanted to give you Colleen's contact information if you want to get in touch with her. Colleen, what's the best way?
Yeah, my first initial followed by my last name. So C as in Colleen, followed by Breems, which is B as in boy, R as in Robert, E as in elephant, E as in elephant, M as in Mary, S as in snake, at beermannlaw.com. Beermann has two N's, and my phone number is 312 621-9700.
Great. And to my listeners, you can also find Colleen in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. You can also go to that website to listen to more podcasts, read articles, and sign up for my free consult. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.